Welcome to the AI-assisted organization podcast with myself, Piers Linney, and my co-host and co-founder of Implement AI, Dr. Alok Shukla. Hi, Alok. So yeah, quite a good weekend it looks like. Yeah.
I did indeed, Piers. I was in Porto for the weekend. If you've not been, I highly recommend it.
And that's Porto in Portugal.
Yes.
That's where you are. Right, yeah. I was taxi for the kids in various sporting events, so we won't dwell on that too much. So let's get into it. So it wasn't quite the chaotic, insane week that we had last week in terms of AI news, but there's always something of interest. So we're going to go through, the relevant AI news for business, some Implement AI updates about our events mostly, and some of what we're up to. And this week we're going to focus. The theme is AI and your data. So the democratization of this use of data, gaining insights and creating value. It's not just for big companies anymore, although they can do more with it now as well. So we're going to go through data and how you need to treat your data and be able to access it. And then we're going to talk about AI of the week, as we do every week. So getting into the news, there's been some quite interesting news on sort of smaller models. So most models are kind of 7 billion, like neurons really, 7 billion to even 70 billion parameters. And now they're developing smaller models, which is 3 billion. And stable AI, they brought out called stable LM3B. So that's 3 billion parameters. Sounds like a lot, it is. And it's still very capable, just not quite as capable as the much larger models. And the point of this is that you can deploy these models onto smaller devices, so mobile devices, maybe even your watch eventually. And we're going to talk about sort of wearables as well today. So maybe devices that are hung around your neck. And what this means is that they use less compute power. They don't need as much battery sort of power as well. So they're much more sort of capable. And what we're going to see is, be able to have these models on your phone, for example, without needing a connection to the internet. So it's quite an important development.
On phone, on glasses, on anything, basically, right? Into any kind of hardware. And I think this is the key, right? You don't always need to ask, the smartest colleague you have in your company to answer a question. Sometimes some questions just need, someone who understands a bit about that context in that area. And that's where these smaller models come in, because we're literally going to work with a team of AIs, and different AIs will need to do different levels of the task. So for the simpler, kind of like more broad brush stuff, these are perfect because they're faster, more data efficient, don't use as much electricity. It's going to be exciting.
But it's also the fact that we always say that AI today is the worst it's ever going to be. And if you talk to Emad, the sort of co-founder of Stability, he'll say that these things are being compressed very, very quickly. So very soon you're going to see either compression, they can get a larger model onto a smaller device, or you're going to see these smaller models become far more efficient, more capable. So within a year or two, I don't think it'll make a difference. I think you'll see models on phones,
intelligence everywhere,
glasses or watches, exactly, that are just as good as the large models today. It just is a matter of time. These are the first sort of mobile or small models that are going to work on these kind of devices, and within a year, it'll be a different world again. So moving on, so Google DeepMind. So what's quite interesting is if you Alok, you were involved in sort of machine learning for years, but AI, especially kind of, let's call it cognitive labor, cognitive AI, there were lots of different sort of research themes, and sort of, it might be computer vision, it might be translation, it might be robotics, but they're all disparate and different. And what's happened is with the generative AI models is that you're now seeing that generalist AI is as good as, if not better, as the specialist AIs. And you're seeing the focus now is really on generalist models or large language models, and then fine tuning them and training them to make them more capable for different sort of markets, different sectors, different knowledge bases. And what you're going to see in robotics is the same thing. So robotics, what you're seeing is specialist training for very, very specific sort of use cases. And what Google DeepMind are trying to do, and they've put together, I think it's 33 different academic labs and 20 different robot types that pull this all together, and have got one kind of training model, you could probably call it, that they're trying to apply to robotics. And what they're seeing already is that these generalist models are now performing better than the robots that have been trained with specialist models.
They've just got much greater context, much more real-world information. They can infer and make connections. I mean, you look at the companies like Figure and Tesla making their Optimus robot. these are not far off. And the ability for these systems to be able to like learn from the real world, understand this object, that object, and sort them in different ways, is going to lend itself very well to like computer-driven models as well. So I think the learning and the capability and the reasoning of the digital world, the physical world, is just going to kind of like again merge into one again, I think.
Yeah, no, saying things like, they've got a range of different things on a table or in a photograph or drawing even, and it can say to the robot, this is computer vision, do something with the extinct animal. And it knows what extinct means. It knows which one's an animal and knows which one's extinct, and therefore it can react to it. So we're really mentioning this because it's not really a capability that a lot of people who are listening and watching this are going to be using today. But the point is that the development you've seen in sort of cognitive labor in terms of AI assisting it, you are going to see in robotics, and that is going to accelerate. So it's further out, but it's absolutely coming.
Yeah, just as one example, like they've shown like with the Google models where it was a text model and then it was shown different X-rays which it didn't recognize before because it wasn't trained visually, but it detected what it was based on the descriptions. The same way I saw from Meta, like I was watching a video where they were showing a video of a room and different people, different objects in it, and it was able to segment and identify all the different areas and all the different items within there. So you start adding the ability to deconstruct and like segment the world and then interact with it and move things, and that just shifts things profoundly, basically.
Great, moving on. So one thing we always say is that you need to implement AI before your competition does. And then there's a ship leaving the harbour. That's my metaphor. Alex got his train leaving the station. You need to get on it or make the jump. And it's quite interesting that the SoftBank CEO, famous for his some very successful investments and some not so successful ones, but he's got a huge amount of cash to deploy. And he said that he thinks that we're going to see AI surpassing human intelligence by 2030. And his point is, which is kind of echoes what we keep saying, is that take advantage of it or be left behind. And this is the point that this technology, and I keep saying this, if you're listening to this, whether you're a large enterprise, you're a small business, this technology is not like the cloud. You cannot wait 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to start thinking about integrate it into your business, becoming AI assisted, to heading for becoming an AI first business. You can't do it because once that train left the station, once that ship's left the harbour, it's going to become increasingly difficult to catch up. And in an exponential world, which we're not quite there yet, but we're seeing the beginnings of it, like to the bottom of that curve, it'll be impossible to catch up. So, and you're seeing this now being echoed by lots of people with lots of amounts of capital. They've done a lot of research. Right, generative AI features being rolled out in the advertising platforms. So this is interesting in two levels. One is because they're rolling AI in this advertising platform. This is the Meta platform, Meta Ad Manager, which I have used in the past myself. And it's interesting because it's powerful. It helps you, create adverts. It gets rid of that kind of writer's block. You can create images now. You can create copy. You can create images based on your copy. So it's really, really powerful. The other interesting thing is that increasingly you're seeing the platforms launch or ship product that is kind of what a lot of SaaS companies used to do. So in this instance, for example, it'd be, creating images, and we'll talk about Canva maybe later, maybe next, but Canva, but copywriting. So the advertising platforms are building in the copywriting capability.
Well, I think we do know what it means for operating AI companies, isn't it? Right? Like if you're just providing a feature, basically, right, you cannot compete with like a platform or an enterprise which is like incorporating your feature. And I saw an example of like the Meta AI where there was like an image and they were trying to like make it optimized for like the portrait view on a phone, and you could literally, even though you only had an image which was a square, you could then extend it to then fit, and it interpolated correctly what the rest of the image would be. So these things which just make it easier to create adverts. I mean, imagine it creates 3 different versions for you. It rewrites your headline in different ways. You're going to just be more likely to spend more money, more likely to have a successful advert, more likely to kind of keep transacting with them. And then if you've got all of the tools on that platform, why are you going to go to somewhere else? It's a bit like on the iPhone. You take a photo, you want to mark it up. You can actually do that within the iPhone app itself, isn't it? Right, for the photo, you just select the different bits and do what you want to do. You're not loading that photo into some separate image app or anything like that. So I think the more these things can become abstracted and compiled and compressed into the point where you're using it, and you can just use that AI, that intelligence immediately, it will just remove all these frictions, and then it becomes a much more magic and much more smooth experience.
Yeah, things like A/B testing, that's going to become much easier. I'll be able to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing. So that's going to become we're going to see that rolled out, I think. But I think that a lot of these, I'm surprised that with companies like Jasper, is it Copy AI, a lot of companies. I saw one the other day actually, someone was trying to sell that does exactly this. But I'm surprised they're almost still in business. I don't know where they migrate to.
It takes time, but I think the thing is these foundational models that like Google, like Anthropic, and like OpenAI are shipping, they're powerful, and the competition amongst them is forcing them to ship out even more powerful features. I mean, I came across this browser called the Arc browser. I've not used it myself, but it's got lots of AI features within it. I'll give an example. And when you open up different browser windows, it actually has them on the side, and it will rename the browser tab to actually be more contextual, so you know what it actually is if you have like 100 of those open. It'll also, if you download a file, it'll rename the file to actually something descriptive about what it is. And I think these things are great, but this is Chrome can just incorporate all these things, or like Microsoft Edge can incorporate all these things. Like these are features. These are not systems.
But it's like OpenAI. So you would have thought that OpenAI is a platform. You got companies like Microsoft or integrating it into embedding it into their products like Microsoft Copilots. But then they launch ChatGPT Enterprise. So it's going to be really interesting seeing that how far the platforms go, because they have this capability in terms of adding that kind of thin layer of SaaS along the top, so they can access them and create value in different markets. On that point, another thing we talk about quite a lot are our personal assistants. So Google Bard is it looks like it's going to morph into become a personal assistant, like a co-pilot. And the reason why this is important from business is that these personal assistants eventually are probably who you're going to be selling to. So if you think about, I have a personal assistant, Alok has one, it knows everything about you, I always say, including your current heartbeat, it knows your taste, your preferences, where you are, where you're going, what you need, when you need it, etc., etc. So in terms of, this is why the internet might go away, because corporate AIs who understand your catalog, your offers, your pricing, etc., your product information, your kind of product roadmap, etc., they're going to be interacting with personal AIs and just trying to make sales. So you're now seeing that Google Bard's still behind ChatGPT, which has always been a bit of a surprise. But it looks like they're going to roll it out and morph it into an assistant. And again, that assistant's going to appear across, Android devices, Google Home, any device which is capable of interacting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some very interesting things that the Google Assistant can do, and I'm just waiting to kind of see how more comes out. But the fact it's got access to your maps position, it's got access to your calendar, it's got access to all your emails. I mean, how helpful and useful it can be is profound.
Yeah, and also I won't go into it right now, but lots of issues there about your personal data as well. So that's going to have to be carefully managed. There is going to be some huge scandal down the line in terms of personal data extracted, and because not just the data in the old days, it was kind of flat and extracted. Now it's being pieced together into a picture of you, and that's what's going to be we're going to see leaked at some point. Now another one which is probably more interest of smaller businesses is Canva. So Canva adding, you haven't used Canva, it's a bit like a browser-based simplified version of Photoshop, best way of describing it, but it's evolving from that. So Canva's adding what they call magic media. So they've added kind of text to images. I'm not sure what they use, whether it's Stable Diffusion, whether it's DALL-E, OpenAI, or whether it's Midjourney. And now they've added text to video, I think, which I guess is not that much use quite yet, because it's not brilliant. That probably is using Runway. But what you're now seeing is that, and I do use Canva as well sometimes to fiddle around with certain things, is that you're now seeing that, again, I'm not particularly, I've got creative ideas, but I'm not very good at executing them. And what's happening is that if you're not particularly creative, you're now going to become creative, because the tools are there for you to create images on the fly, the copy even inside these apps, and then iterate it. And even if it's not quite right, at least you can pass it on to a designer who then can see 90% of what you're actually looking for.
It just makes it much more democratic, much faster. And the thing is, like, I would be interested to see what the statistics are like on has there been a downturn, reduction in volume in the number of people using copywriters using on people per hour or Upwork. I'd be interested to know that if AI is affecting that, because I also think that like for Fiverr, basic image editing, basic image manipulation, these tools are going to abstract a lot of that away. So I'd be quite interested to see how that evolves over time.
Well, we mentioned in last week's pod, our theme was training. So a lot of it depends on how well trained your team is or the people you're working with in terms of using the AI. Because, if you don't really know what you're doing, your copy is going to be boring, it's going to be generic, and your images are going to be, pretty average as well. If you do know what you're doing, these things can be profoundly, they can create sort of profound new experiences for you and your customers and your colleagues. Right, so that's the news for today. There's other stuff, but we're gonna leave it there. So implement AI again. We're focusing on events. They seem to work really, really well. People enjoy them. They take a lot away. Got some great feedback. So we've still got the event in Manchester with Manchester Growth Hub on the 18th of October, and we've also got an event in London on the 16th
Next
of
Monday.
October, which is kind of next week. So next Monday. So if you're in London, this is it's been put on with us and also in partnership with, it's a private members club for entrepreneurs really called Homegrown. It's part of the Home House Group. So they've got a fantastic venue. If you haven't been there, I'm a member near Marble Arch in London. So we're doing the event there. So even if you're not a member, quite welcome to come along. You can probably see the premises as well and get a feel for the club and spend a couple of hours with us talking about AI. And we're also doing a Q&A session as well. So it's going to be quite open. So if you want to get down to that 16th in London, it's near Marble Arch roughly, next Monday. And if you're in Manchester, the 18th of October. And anything else? And are you back in Dublin in November?
I am. Yes, I'm back in Dublin for another conference in November.
So we'll cover that one nearer the time. I know we're talking about it quite a while, but an AI agent white paper, we're just sort of tweaking that. That's going to be something which I think actually is, we've got our kind of AI assisted organization white paper, kind of our framework. We've got one about the fractional chief AI officer. It's quite an important role to have in your business. But then what we're really focusing on is AI agents. I'm going to talk about that a bit now in terms of how they work, how they interact with your data. So that's an important white paper for Implement AI. We've got the framework. This is kind of what we do. That's what it's going to be, what it's going to cover. And again, if you're interested in, taking your first steps into becoming an AI-assisted organization, the best program we do is probably AI Activate. It's a 60-day sprint. We look at policy, look at governance, and we look at training, we look at your workflows, and we select one, and we see how we can automate that or use one of our agents to do that. It's like, I think of it as a virtual employee, or kind of just tweak one of them. Often it's the data, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Often it's the data or how it connects and interfaces with your business as it already stands. Anything else, Alok?
No, I agree with you. Like, because this AI assisted organization just shows like the 5 levels of AI and like the overall framework and strategy. And the chief AI officer one talks about like how AI is going to transform and impact all the areas of your business and what you need to be cognizant of to build your own strategy. And then with the AI agent bit paper, it's all about basically your labor force, your digital labor force. You've got your human, your carbon, and your digital, like labor force and the silicon labor force. And I think the whole point here is like, how does that work? What can it do? And moving forward, and it's really exciting because everyone's going to have an AI team on their payroll. It's just a question of like, what are the tasks they do and how's it going to execute?
Right, moving on. So this is today's theme is data. And this is something that we talk about a lot with our clients. Now, I've come from a background in sort of cloud, and there was many years talking about big data, and big data was expensive. It was time consuming. Not only that, you had to work out how to create your data warehouse and and then manage that data. But then extracting insights from that data using machine learning models, and again, they were kind of specialists rather than generalists, was again very expensive and time consuming. And it was the preserve really of quite large companies. That world has changed. That's completely and utterly changed this year. So, the idea of what used to be called big data and extracting insights from that data, insights you never knew you actually needed to know, the unknown unknowns, is now being democratized. So you've got the cloud has allowed you to sort of store and manage data, and AI is going to enable you to analyze that data. But Alok, let's talk through the first step, though, isn't it, in talking to all of our clients is
step one.
I don't know where to start with this really. So it's understanding your data in terms of where it is, and understanding what you should consider as data, because now it's everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Step one, don't leak. Record everything. So I think that the whole point is just like you say, like classically people thought of data as like, oh, it's just the emails that come in, or it's the files on my Dropbox, or it's the ones in my SharePoint. But actually it's all the phone calls, it's all the meetings, it's all the communications that happen in between. And all of that adds context. So if you think about like what's happening at the consumer level with Google Assistant, where it's like helping you understand and organize different things, the same thing is happening in your organization, where you've got so much information about different clients, different meetings, different proposals, different strategies, different projects, and all of that's like in disparate places, and it might be one employee's drive in a different place. So step number one is like start recording, and so you can start to actually understand what's going on, where you're actually focusing on, and then you can start doing some very interesting things off the back of that, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of people sort of don't quite understand the value of the data they've got. The one that we come across the most, and we'll just touch on this later, and you'll see why, is that phone calls. So most businesses have got phone calls coming in or going out of the business. Often they're not really managed particularly well. Often they're not recorded. So there's a huge amount of information in those phone calls, from who your customers are, what they're interested in. If you've got video calls, even voice calls, actually, even transcripts of voice calls, you can extract sentiment. You can't begin to comprehend the amount of value in phone calls. So number one, as Alex said, is don't leak any data. And one of the frustrations is that sometimes you capturing data, it's then being kind of captured in these sort of proprietary databases inside a specific app, sometimes, say a CRM for a particular industry. And they haven't got, and even the phone system sometimes, it's amazingly, they don't have APIs. They don't even have an FTP server sometimes for the phone systems. So our advice is that if you're using technology where they don't have APIs, don't enable you to access your data, or it's not on the roadmap, you need to change those solutions out, those applications, pretty sharpish.
No, I agree, and I think, and like you said, it's like it's not just recording it; it's like having it analyzed and insights from it. Because every day a customer will be dropping a suggestion or dropping an opportunity, and if you can capitalize on those, these add up. The number of customer interactions per day, per month, per year, and getting a small uptick in that is like revenue growth without any marketing cost.
Yeah, and also you're seeing now, we're talking about recording phone calls and video calls, and you're now seeing in the consumer market really these pendants like Rewind. You saw we mentioned it last week. Maybe the sort of
the Ray-Ban glasses,
the Ray-Ban glass, maybe the kind of humane app, which is like supposed to replace a phone, different form factor. You're now going to see everything being recorded. So imagine now, because you will see a commercial application for this. Imagine now that everybody in your business, everybody's interacting with clients, probably going to have to tell them it's being recorded clearly, but everything is recorded in audio, everything.
Well, police. Look at the police. They've got the body cam, isn't it, right? Like, so that they know what's going on with the different situations, stuff like this. If you look at like medical legal, for example, I'm sure like consultations will start being recorded quite quickly. So then, if people say, oh, you didn't tell me this, or versus I did tell you this, then all of that can be harmonized and flat out. So I actually think, this technology could actually help a lot of situations, because it would just provide clarity to what actually occurred in those situations. And this is why it's so important to like proactively get ahead of this, basically.
Yeah, so audio is really important. So number one is don't collect everything, don't leak anything, and then make sure it's accessible. Make sure your data is easily accessible. It's your data, and if application solution provider isn't willing to make it available or put an API or something on their roadmap, you need to think about changing them out, because they're going to be a barrier to essentially you creating competitive advantages, because that is what having access to your data, being able to analyze it actually creates. Now, you don't need to have, we often say, we need to create a data warehouse, that's a big project. It's not the case. What you need to have is access to the data. The beauty of these models is, and the way you can structure these, is that as long as you can access the data and you can extract the data, the model then, depending how you sort of prompt it and structure the agent, can then make sense of it, kind of that lot.
Yeah, exactly. And there's things like, for example, like imagine you've got like all the meetings or all the phone calls there, and you're thinking, okay, how would I know that they're talking about a customer or they're talking about a company? Well, there's things like NER, like named entity recognition, where it can actually extract anything to do with like this name is an organization, or this is a customer, or this is this. So you can actually have like this kind of like filter, built into your system. So then every time there's something interesting come up, so then imagine you say, okay, tell me about the Harrison account next week. It could then show you all those items about that, which some might be from meetings, some might be from a phone call, some might be from something else. And this is where it can then surface to you in the future and say, this is an action you should take. Because that's where it's going to go. It's going to go from like understanding what happened to helping you guide and predict and prevent what you don't want to happen. So for example, one use case that we've been discussing with a healthcare provider is like how to understand, different information that a patient's got, and then from that understanding, like what might they need in the future? How can you prevent these problems? How can you make things, better? So it's the predictive ability to like nudge and change the future, which becomes very powerful. But you can't do that if you're leaking data and you don't know where you are, basically.
Yeah, so I think one of the changes is that what these platforms like this capability is fill in the gaps, understand what the gaps are, and actually make suggestions. That wasn't really always the case. You kind of had to know what you were looking for. So what we're seeing with one of our AI agents is an AI data entry agent. So imagine now you've got the perfect customer record, for one of a better example. You know what you've got, you know what the delta is, what the gaps are, and that data entry agent will then look for or research or talk to the customer to make sure you complete the record. And it will keep iterating until it gets there. And if it can't do it, it will drag a human into the process and to ask them to help to complete it. So what you then start to see, which is going to cover in another podcast, is these different agents. So you've got ones that are looking at the data, extracting the data, another one that's tasked to maybe fill in the gaps, or another one that's tasked to make suggestions. It is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Now, while you're doing that, one of the important things, and we always come back to this in most of our podcasts, is you've got to put a framework in place about your privacy, your policy, your governance, because now you're talking about applying extremely powerful tools to customer data.
Exactly. You have to have the right permissions, policies, frameworks, security, everything in place, because this is what's going to now, this is basically, by putting that in place and then by capturing the data and having insights from it, this is what basically adds, for want of a better term, more horsepower to your engine. Because you can then, per day, uncover more insights, transact more, unlock more opportunities, increase average spend per customer, provide a better customer service. All these things add up, so your rate of acceleration increases. So the quicker you get this in place, the more distance you can start to gain.
And they're real powerful, isn't it? And the thing that blows my mind, we've developed one agent which is like an auto consult agent, we call it, where it's having a conversation with a customer, and in real time, it's using the data the business already has, as well as what the customer's saying. So it's actually in real time is doing data analysis and working out, well, how can I help this customer based on what we can offer? And then in real time, it's sort of adding value to that customer and adding value to your business. That's a game changer. A lot of the kind of the big data, really, the analysis was really about a data scientist sifting through it and coming up with some ideas. Yeah. They're going to present some senior leadership team. Now it can be real time and personalized.
Yeah, and at the customer, forefront, either through an app or, guiding the assistant in the retail interaction, all these sorts of things.
So the thing to really take away from this pod today is that, data, there is money in your data, and it doesn't matter what size business you have. If you've got a large enterprise, you're probably not using your enormous data set and maximizing the value of it. If you're a small business, you've got your customer data there, which is going to help you to create a really personalized solution. So, this data is about monetization of that data. It's about creating value. And in a more competitive world, and we always say, where eventually everyone's going to have artificial intelligence, okay? It's going to be like, I always say, it's about spell check. So how do you create more competitive advantage? And it's going to be by collecting data and extracting insights from it more efficiently, more effectively.
And having the data which other people don't have access to, right? That's the whole point, right? So if you've got your own meeting data, you've got your phone call data, you've got email data, then that's proprietary data that your other competitors don't have access to through their general AI. So that's the key.
And that's about creating, isn't it? It's about creating more interesting ways to in a nice way, extract that data, which is customer experience. And the people increasingly are going to be, used to talking to artificial intelligence. The problem with talking to, bots now is that they're pretty basic, and you get confused and annoyed very, very quickly. And you start typing, I want to speak to a human. Whereas, these things have already passed a Turing test very quickly. You won't be able to know the difference. So when you're having a conversation with AI, as long as they're getting value or they're getting the answer, people won't care. They're going to expect it quite soon. So the last thing then is again, we come back to training, is that your team need to understand what data you have when they're thinking about, especially your technical team, CTOs, CIOs. This is why it's important to have a chief AI officer, because they understand how this all fits together. When you're looking at selecting applications or designing applications in your business, or there's some kind of IT project, make sure that you can that you store your data in all of its forms, even video. And this goes down to high res, cameras in shops even. Store everything, because you're never going to quite know how you're going to be able to use it. Make sure none of it leaks. Make sure you've got the policy and frameworks in place, and then ensure you've got the intelligence, essentially, to go and analyze that data and extract the insights that mean you're going to be able to monetize it more effectively. Whew. So data is a big one. So the last 3 pods, really, we're kind of going through, the policy, the framework. We've talked about training, your first AI advantage, and then data. You've got to get that right, because otherwise everything else we're going to talk about over the next couple of months isn't going to work. Which brings us neatly on, Alok, to AI of the week. Now, I was talking about, various ones that we talked about in the news, but you had a much better idea, didn't you?
Of course. So, as we've been talking about today, data is key. And at the same time, you've got your team members. Your team members are doing the best job they can possibly do. They're, let's look at the phone system. The phone is a black box. How many phone calls come into businesses every day? And imagine your customer's worth, I don't know, £2,000 to £20,000. It could be for like a dental treatment. It could be like fitting a new kitchen, or it could be to, a whole printing contract, which is worth like 100 grand. The thing is, if you've got loads of phone calls coming in, you don't know what's happening, you don't know who's answering it and what the opportunities are, you can't really improve. You don't really know where you're spending your money on. So we see that, like, as I said before, you've got your human employees, you're also going to have your digital labor force, which is going to start. And we think that one of the great first place to start is essentially with the phone. So AI of the week is our AI phone agent, which basically works with your human team member to listen to all the phone calls, but then not just that, identify all the opportunities. So show you where the sales opportunity was missed, show you 3 personal items about that person, like they play golf, they do this. It extracts all the little tidbits from the conversation about that person, and also tells you how interested they were in purchasing, and also some objections. It also surfaces what potential objections or complaints or concerns they have. So imagine you've got a customer record, you've got like they didn't buy and they didn't book ahead. You've also got the details of some personal information about them, what they're bothered about, and a little summary. I mean, how much more empowered are you to actually like re-engage that person?
Well, but also it tells you, because it extracts what they're interested in, so product X,
yes,
and what it's worth to you. So you then know that, well, hang on a sec, this person was interested. They were interested in product X. It's worth, I don't know, £2,000 to me, but they haven't booked a meeting or made an order. And these are the objections.
And the dashboard shows you missed 40 grand worth of opportunities today. I mean, like, that's going to inspire some action, isn't it?
And then it then notifies the right person, and based on that information, it creates a draft email.
So yeah, exactly, the suggestions to do.
Or a script, if you're going to call them back. So yeah, you're right. Actually, that is AI of the week, because it is powerful.
We're doing a closed pilot with different clients and different in specific sectors. So if you're interested and you have like a use case that should work for that, do get in touch.
So we're going to leave it there for this week. If you haven't read our white papers, go to our website, log on, download them, sign up for AI Insider newsletter. You'd also get a personalized AI-driven little sort of video from me. It's personalized to you and your name, which is quite interesting. And that's a great example of just basic personalization, which we're sort of toying with. Please follow us and subscribe on YouTube. And if you can get to our events in London or in Manchester, please do, and please, rate our podcast on Apple if you've enjoyed it. And that's it for this week, really. So this is the AI Assisted Organization podcast, signing off. Myself, Pearsley Alok Shukla, and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.